Hello and welcome to another episode of Green Time. I'm your host, John Hickey with the Missouri Sierra Club. And on today's episode, we're going to look at energy efficiency. The Sierra Club recently launched a national campaign called Ready for 100, which is challenging 100 cities across the United States to commit to transitioning to 100% clean energy and moving away from fossil fuels for electricity and other energy needs. A key component of moving to 100% clean energy is energy efficiency. We have two efficiency experts with us on today's episode to talk in more detail about that. Let me introduce you. We have Kellye Markowski with Energy Smart Homes, who focuses on residential solar.
Residential energy efficiency.
Residential energy efficiency. And then Steve O'Rourke with Microgrid that does both solar and energy efficiency. Yes. And your energy efficiency work, is it largely commercial?
Commercial and industrial.
Commercial and industrial.
Right.
Okay, so welcome to the show. And why don't we start off, Kellye, tell us about Energy Smart Homes. What does that mean? What do you do?
Okay, so I'm a residential energy auditor, and my goal as an independent auditor is to help customers understand how they can make their home more energy efficient and cost-effective ways to approach that, and to point out some of the low-hanging fruit, the things that aren't going to cost very much for them to reduce their energy usage, and as well as work their way up into some of the more expensive things that have to be done to a home to make it efficient, but also to eliminate some of those things that they should not spend their money on because they're not going to be fruitful. They're not going to yield a result.
And are those steps the same for each house, or is it different depending on the house?
No, every house is somewhat unique. I mean, there are some similarities depending on the year that a home was built and that sort of thing. But every house has its own unique set of circumstances. And this could be, how many children do you have in the house leaving lights on, all the way to my house is 100 years old and it has no insulation in the attic whatsoever and it leaks like a sieve. So my goal as an independent auditor is to investigate that home, that family situation in that home and that structure, and provide a good plan for them to follow, one that's going to yield results.
Mm-hmm. Good. Same question for you, Steve. What is microgrid in the commercial and industrial space? I might think, oh wow, these big businesses, don't they already have a bunch of bean counters and people with slide rules walking around figuring this stuff out? Is there any energy efficiency to be found?
Oh, absolutely. So, in Microgrid Energy, we do both energy efficiency and renewable energy. And renewable energy is primarily solar. When we had the utility rebate here in Missouri, we had hundreds and hundreds of solar installations. And so now is an opportunity. While we always have looked at the building as an integrated whole, now we have an opportunity to go back to our solar customers and talk to them about energy efficiency. In a lot of cases, we talked to them while we were selling them solar. Mm-hmm. We looked at light. Every time I walk into a building, I look at the lights. Mm-hmm. I can't look at the HVAC quite so easily, but I'm always looking at lights to find out, have they done their lighting upgrade yet? And there are some folks who are on the old inefficient T12 fluorescent lamps, that are just really, there have been great incentives to upgrade and they missed those incentives and now they've got to jump, to the LEDs. So they're, the incentive programs here really help. It's interesting, we've had relatively inexpensive energy here for years, historically low prices here in the Midwest. Mm-hmm. And so it doesn't make economic sense to do a lot of energy efficiency upgrades because our energy costs are so low. But those bean counters that you talked about have been seeing double-digit rate increases for the last couple of years, and they're beginning to take notice. So now they're starting to see, maybe it makes more sense to upgrade. As natural gas prices fell, it doesn't make as much, it's not as strong an economic case to replace that boiler or furnace as it would have been if gas prices would be higher.
Right. And yet at the same time, my understanding is some sectors, for example, hospitals, have found tremendous savings by energy efficiency investments. I think BJC in St. Louis, Mercy Hospital in Joplin, that there's some sectors that have been seeing really big gains.
It's not just in, there's energy efficient, higher efficiency equipment, but there's also conservation. So it's how you do your operations. Mm-hmm. What can I do to reduce? An example is, okay, so I put in LED lighting, okay, but now I want to reduce the amount of lighting that I'm using, so I put in lighting controls that will shut those lights off when nobody's in there. That kind of thing. So not only efficiency, but also conservation.
The same strategies exist in the home that exist on the commercial level. A smart strip that when you turn your computer off or your television off, it turns off every other component that is hooked into the smart strip, turns those off as well, conserving on energy. So it's our lighting controls. Sensors when you walk in and out of bedrooms, so closets, bathrooms, kids' bedrooms, notorious spaces for lights to just be inadvertently left on all the time. For about $35 to change out a sensor in a room will solve that problem and end a lot of arguments in the family. So exactly. That's one way it's the same notion on the residential level as it is on the commercial level. We have the same concerns.
Right.
Do you find generally you can save more on heating or electricity in a standard residential audit you would do?
Yeah, so there's low-hanging fruit on the electrical side, which has to do with changing your light bulbs. Mm-hmm. And I have to share this example that I began auditing 6 years ago. I audited my home, I put a plan in place, and I have cut my electric consumption in half and have spent under $500 and have saved well over that. So, wow. And people, I think, largely people don't understand that if you just, an energy audit puts the plan in place, right? Many homeowners will, if you ask 9 out of 10 homeowners, if you ask 10 homeowners, what do I need to do to make my house more energy efficient? What do you think they're going to say? Windows. Replace my windows. When in fact, that is not 9 out of 10 times the primary thing that should be done in a home that is really going to yield substantial results, immediate results on your energy bill, right? So, but lighting is a great example. Lighting controls. Now, when it comes to the heating and cooling, you get into how leaky is the house, and test the house with a blower door test, or use an IR camera, do a complete building envelope evaluation, look at the insulation, the various spaces that should be insulated. And those kinds of measures are going to yield anywhere between 10, 20, 25% savings if you address them. And then once the building envelope is addressed, then you move into, okay, what do we do about the efficiency of equipment in this home? You wouldn't want to replace an HVAC system first, really. A lot of people do make that mistake. Well, that HVAC system is trying to keep up with the outside because your house is maybe leaky and under-insulated. So you kind of want to do things in order. And if you do things in the proper order, then it will yield fantastic results. If you move from a 80% furnace to a 90% furnace, 10% off your bill, right there. Mm-hmm. You move to a 98% furnace, 18% off your bill, mm-hmm. right? And that's if that 80% furnace is even functioning at 80%. It's a 15 or 20-year-old furnace that might be functioning at 75%, 70%. I've seen some pretty horrific situations, So at any rate, it's a whole building science approach. I don't care whether you're talking about residential or you're talking about commercial. It's a look at a structure, not only the folks that are living or working in it, but it's addressing the building as a whole, the structure as a whole, and making a plan, putting a plan in place that yields fantastic results.
That makes
for
sense.
People.
Well, that's very interesting. Let's take a quick break. We've got a short video to show you about the Sierra Club Ready for 100 campaign, and then we'll be right back. Hello and welcome back to Green Time. I'm your host John Hickey with the Missouri Sierra Club. Remember, our guests today are talking about energy efficiency. We have Kellye Markowski with Energy Smart Homes, and we've got Steve O'Rourke with Microgrid Energy. And Mark Jacobson, a professor at Stanford University, has put together a roadmap of how Missouri could move to 100% clean energy. The biggest chunk of that roadmap is actually energy efficiency. More than wind, more than solar, more than anything else. That sort of surprised me, and because 40% of our current energy use, that's an awful lot. But going to your experience, Steve, you've gone into some of these bigger commercial and industrial concerns. What kind of savings have you been able to wring out of some of these places?
You know, when Kellye talked about, cutting the energy bill in their home in half, we did the same thing in our home. In your home, it's a much smaller thing, and there's a lot more that you have control over. Mm-hmm. When you get into a business, there's just so many more variables. So it would be exceptional for us to save a business 50%, because it just takes a lot. There's a lot of things that you got to do. Like Kellye had talked about, it's the building envelope, sealing and insulating the building envelope, upgrading your HVAC equipment, your lighting, your water heating. There's a lot of things that you can do. And then just in terms of managing your plug loads. So if you think about that, and you've got not just 4 people in the house or 3 people or 7 or 2, mm-hmm. You've got hundreds of people in this building that all have their behaviors about how they use energy. So it's much more challenging to change the behavior of those people, of so many more people. So that's why we so much more take advantage of building controls, where now you can't go and touch that thermostat. The thermostat have automatic setbacks, and the thermostats you may be able to adjust it, but only within a certain range. Mm-hmm. Okay, lighting controls, because I can't get, if you think about it, it's tough to keep after our kids to turn the lights out. It's even tougher to keep after your employees.
Yes, you got a couple hundred of them too.
Exactly.
Like one person forgets, and
who aren't concerned about the energy bill.
Exactly.
Right.
The least.
I mean, they're no more concerned about the utility bill than our kids are, frankly.
Yeah, that's right.
But so lighting controls come in real handy for that. So we've seen tremendous savings for a variety of our customers in energy efficiency.
But I would think that on the flip side, say if you're adding installation, the insulation, it's a lot more efficient to add it to a 40,000 square foot building than a 1,500 square foot building. Because you still got to, you still go into the attic once, and it's just a question of how much do you get to lay out before you come down.
And most homes do have attics that you can go in and blow in insulation. Most businesses don't.
I was going to say,
okay.
The structure is different.
It's challenging to go back and, if you're putting a new roof on, it's an excellent time for you to invest in upgrading the insulation in the roof. But there's once you've got your building envelope complete, it's relatively expensive, particularly if you go back into an old home to try to put insulation into those wall cavities.
Or let's say you put insulation in and you sort of covered up all of the holes that exist on the attic floor in a residence. So now it's not cost effective to go sweep this insulation aside and address these holes that are the leakage in the building. So that kind of goes back to that issue of it's important to have a plan that puts things all in the correct order, right? Mm-hmm. So because it'll end up costing you more if you do these things sort of out of order, right?
Right, and given that, say, looking at the residential side, most homeowners once, maybe twice in their life would do any substantial energy efficiency retrofit to a home, and so their experience is going to be minor. And I'm speaking from experience because I had a professional home energy auditor come in and look at my house and say, okay, here's the 7 things to do, and here's the order to do them in, and here's the best return on investment, and we work our way down the list.
Right.
And I think my heating bill went down 33% when comparing the same sort of number of heating degree days. Right. So I was comparing sort of similar months, and that's partly because I had bad insulation and I had an old inefficient furnace, so I had a lot of low-hanging fruit. It's a 1915 house, and it probably wasn't even that good of a house in 1915, but it's didn't get better with age. So
right.
There's a lot of low-hanging fruit to address. And going back to this Mark Jacobson study, where Mark from Stanford was looking at what would energy efficiency mean in the context of Missouri moving to 100% clean energy, his estimate was that actually when you put together the net utility bill, including the efficiency savings and the cost of wind and solar, and mashed it all together, his estimate was that annual utility costs would be $368 less per household per year when you netted it all out, which goes against the common wisdom that, oh, solar is great, but it's so expensive and coal's cheap and we can't really afford clean energy. Does that jive with your experience in the energy efficiency sector?
I absolutely think it's an attainable goal, and I don't look at it on the residential side as a difficult goal to achieve, given my experience, what I've experienced in my own home, and what I've seen other customers experience with regard to energy efficiency, because it's not necessary. You work your way up to the expensive measures, right? You start with the low-hanging fruit, and you start cutting your cost, and you start seeing those things. Your electric bill come down 20%, and then you make another change, it maybe cost you $150, and your electric bill comes down another 14%, right? And then you do a little bit of air sealing, and maybe it's gaskets on windows and attic accesses, and doors are upgraded a little bit, and all of a sudden you're feeling more comfortable in your house, you're feeling less drafty, and you notice that your bill came down 10 or 15% just because you stopped the air from coming in. So I looked at that figure and I thought that was a very conservative figure, and that it would very easily be obtainable.
And
given the timeline.
Yeah. And one benefit that we have now is many utilities offer rebates to help offset that upfront investment, and that's true on the commercial side too.
Right.
You have some
What's
great
for
rebates
example?
on
How
the
does
commercial side.
how does that help a business? What level of rebate are we talking?
In most cases, these energy efficiency measures will pay for themselves without those rebates, but that rebate really helps to push them over the edge. Yeah. Or if they are, when companies are looking at their capital budgets, they're looking at return on investment. I can take this money and I can invest it into additional equipment or additional trucks or whatever it may, that help make my company money, okay? And so I've got these other maintenance things that I have to do, but I minimize those because they don't really have a payback, okay? And in the case of these energy things, well, it's going to keep cooling or heating or lighting or whatever, just somewhat inefficiently, okay? But if I invested that money that I was going to invest in my HVAC or lighting, and I put that over here and invest in additional equipment, I can grow my business faster. So there's a competition for capital. So that whenever somebody sees free money out there, they absolutely want to jump on it. Now, Ameren, if you've got something that's got a payback of less than 18 months, Ameren's not going to give you an incentive because that ought to be enough of itself for you to do it if it's a payback of 18 months. Okay, so the PACE program is available primarily on the commercial side, but we're looking at some inroads on the residential side. The PACE program, it stands for Property Assessed Clean Energy, and that allows a property owner to elect to have a special tax assessment to pay for energy efficiency improvements. So they can go in and do those more expensive things like geothermal or go in and replace my old furnace and my air conditioner, which is expensive. Okay, but I can cover that, and I can have the cost spread over a 20-year term. And if I move out of my home after 10 years, just whoever buys the home continues to pay that assessment, but they also get this great equipment, this high efficiency equipment that I invested in.
So PACE, that was the funding mechanism that was used at the Missouri Athletic Club in downtown St. Louis, right?
Right.
And my understanding is that was both a big investment as well as a great return for the building owner.
Exactly, and it was the enabler that made that happen.
Great. Well, let's come back to this discussion. We're going to take another short break and see another short video from the Sierra Club that talks more about energy issues. Then we'll be back.
The 20th century was powered by polluting fossil fuels, big coal, oil, and gas. It came at a huge environmental and health cost. But we knew there was a better way. Clean, renewable energy cuts pollution, grows our economy, protects our air and water, and gives our climate a fighting chance. The good news is we're reaching that tipping point where solar and wind are becoming cheaper than dirty fuels. U.S. solar installations have almost tripled in the past 3 years. Solar jobs are growing at a rate 20 times faster than the rest of the economy, and costs have dropped by over 50% in the past 5 years. Texas is just one example of where solar power is cheaper than gas and coal. Another is Colorado's largest utility adding more solar and wind because it's cheaper. And U.S. wind energy has tripled in the last 6 years. That means wind turbine manufacturing is busier than ever in creating good American jobs. 55 countries, including Canada, get over half their energy from renewable sources. Investors are reading the signs too, with global clean energy investment up 162% in 2014. And the majority of voters agree we should invest in clean energy. Transitioning to renewable energy will eliminate the real risks of oil spills, contamination of our groundwater from fracking, and pollution of our rivers and lakes from coal ash. With every clean energy victory, we're closer to having 100% clean energy by 2050, closer to cleaner air and water, and the chance to slow climate disruption. When we free ourselves of dirty fossil fuels, we're never going back.
Hello and welcome back to Green Time. I'm your host, John Hickey with the Missouri Sierra Club. Our guest today, Kellye Markowski with Energy Smart Homes, Steve O'Rourke with Microgrid. We're almost to the end of our episode. Let's leave one pearl of wisdom from your experience in this energy efficiency sector for our viewers. Kellye, you're up first.
Well, I like to point out to customers that energy efficiency, once you make your home energy efficient, you begin saving money. That's for all of the days that you live in that house. How many years, how many days is that going to be? It also adds value when you go to sell your home. It has a greater return than the stock market. It's something you can count on. You know, once you've made your home efficient, you're going to be saving dollars. You're going to be putting those dollars in your pocket, and you're going to be earning some interest or being able to invest those in something else.
I bet many people wish they'd invested in their audit from you 6 months ago instead of putting it into the stock market, considering what happened to the stock market. Steve, what's your pearl of wisdom?
I think what Kellye is saying is right on. You know, energy efficiency is the cheapest form of energy. Okay, so it's cheaper than renewable energy, it's cheaper than anything else. So the more we invest in energy efficiency, the less we have to build renewable energy or fossil fuel energy plants. So it's really key that we focus on energy efficiency. The less energy you use when you do invest in renewable energy, the higher the offset. You know, so if I was using 100 units of energy and now I'm only using 50, well, if I'm producing 30 units of renewable energy, I'm producing 60% of my energy now. 30 out of 50 rather than 30 out of 100.
Great. Okay, well, I hope you all enjoyed the episode. You got some great information from some very expert folks. We'll see you next episode. Thanks for watching.